Hello again, everyone. It's Ariel Helwani here on this Monday afternoon. Pleasure to be joined by multiple-time BJJ world champion, longtime practitioner, a longtime MMA fighter, former UFC fighter, now head coach, Robert Drysdale, who, of course, has been in the news over the past couple of days. I really appreciate him talking to me today, and we will get into everything that has happened since Saturday night. First off, Robert, thank you so much for the time. How are you?
I'm doing great, Ariel. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, last couple of days have not been great. Things didn't go as expected. We've been planning that big day in the UFC for a long time, and things didn't go our way. But I really appreciate the opportunity to explain myself.
And we are very happy to have you here. And I will just say this, obviously I was critical of how it was handled. I always try not to make things personal, right? I'm always just trying to look at what happened. I have a lot of respect for you. I've known you for a long time, and I think it says a lot about you that you would want to talk to me as opposed to hold a grudge or send me some nasty text, which other people, would have done in the past. I think it says a lot about your character that you would want to come on here and speak about all of this, especially to me. So I want to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Let's start here. 2 days later, do you still feel the same way as you did Saturday? I spoke to you on Saturday via text. You've also talked to other outlets like MMAfighting.com, and you said that in essence, you stand by the decision and have no regrets. Do you still feel the same way?
Yes, I do. And yeah, I think that the one thing that got a little, I think the public perhaps took a little, misconstrued is that Max's health was never at risk. His safety was never at risk. If Max had hurt himself there seriously, broken a jaw, if he had, lost his vision, I would have jumped over that fence and interrupted that fight before the judge could be on it. Like, no one in that arena cares more about Max than I do. So, I knew that he wasn't at risk. I knew that it was more than just fatigue. He was mentally frustrated. And I wanted to bring him back to life. I want to revive him. I want to convince him to get back in there. And I had 60 seconds to do it. If you watch the video closely, I'm even like, when he first says call it, I'm almost like shocked. Like, I'm silent for a second because I can't register what he's saying. Like, I can't make the connection between the word call it and him quitting because, like, I can't even fathom the fact that he was doing that. So it threw me back a little bit, and I had like very little time while on national television to recompose myself and like, what do I do? And my immediate reaction is what I feel was the correct one, was try to bring him back to life because I knew that he was going to regret that decision. It was going to be one of the gravest mistakes of his life. And he regrets it already. So I knew that was going to happen. I know how fighters think. I know how they are. And I know that deep down, he didn't want to quit.
So allow me to just set the scene in case there's someone who hasn't seen this. If you're watching this, I'm assuming that you did see it, but just for the sake of this conversation, so Max Rohskopf gets this opportunity on 5 days' notice to fight Austin Hubbard on Saturday night in Las Vegas. It's his UFC debut. He's 25 years old. He's 5-0. He's a big time prospect. A lot of people have been talking about him and have high hopes for him and still have high hopes for him. And the fight doesn't obviously go his way early on in the judges' eyes. According to the official scorecards, they all scored the first round for Austin Hubbard 10-9. There are some people out there that thought Max did enough to win that round. And then the second round, all three judges scored it 10-8 in favor of Austin Hubbard. And so this sequence that we're talking about happens going into the third round, that 1 minute rest period, if you will, going into the final round where he's talking to you and he tells you to quote unquote call it and says it repeatedly. I counted 9 times in addition to the other conversation that you guys had. At your discretion, like in your mind, as you're watching this before going into the third, how do you feel about the way he's fighting and the way the fight is unfolding before you actually sit down and talk to him going into that third round?
I honestly felt he won the first round. Like, I find myself disagreeing with judges all the time. I feel like the vast majority of fighters and experts I spoke to, they feel Max won that round. The thing is, judges a lot of times don't count the grappling, and that's what it comes down to. They only count, like, if you get out of a bad position on the ground, they count the getting out of the good position more than they count the fact that the guy got him in a bad position to begin with. It's a very strange mentality. It's a defensive mentality, right? Typically in jiu-jitsu, they reward aggression, not defense. In MMA, the judges think a little backwards in terms of grappling. They reward defense better more than offense, which is backwards, but that's just my opinion. But I thought Max won the first round. But speaking of the fight itself, I think first off, 5 days notice coming out of a quarantine. He had a bit of an injury, like a while ago, and it had it fully recovered. But this is the UFC. When the UFC knocks on your door and says, do you want to fight? You take it. This is the moment he's been dreaming about his whole life. And, in hindsight is always 2020. And we can go like it was, we could have waited longer. But when we got the news, Max was excited and he was in and he made weight. But he had a 5-day camp, and I think that led, and I think this is where we erred the most. This was the biggest mistake throughout the whole process, is we were perhaps overconfident about Max's ability. And I'll tell you why. I have seen, I'm not going to mention names, but I've seen top 5, top 10 UFC contenders in the 155 and the 170 division get, with small gloves on, sparring rounds, get taken down by Max 3 times and tapped within a 1-minute round. I mean, a 5-minute round. He takes them down and taps them repeatedly. And we see them do this in the gym over and over and over. He goes, and when he fights, he does the same thing. So perhaps the mistake was thinking it's a bigger stage, he's going to be nervous. I don't think we underestimated his opponent. I don't think that's the case. But I think Max was so eager to prove himself. He was so excited about being there. He had been dreaming about this moment for so long. He went out there, balls to the wall, round one. He's trying to do the Boston Crab, round one, the pro wrestling move, right? He does it in practice. But it's not something you do in the first round when your opponent is fresh, right? I have a philosophy I have with my fighters. It goes like this. I say it every day in practice: control, control, damage, submission. In that order, and it's important that order is kept in mind while we're fighting, because that's how you win a fight, right? And I think Max got a little carried away, and then that led to him gassing out. Once again, he didn't have a full-on camp. And once he gassed, he broke mentally. And him breaking mentally is, what I was upset about, because these things, that's not a physical health issue. That is a matter of will. And that's what I was trying to fix within those 60 seconds. And I did my best. And if I had 90 seconds to do it, I would have done it. If I had 9 minutes to do it, I would have insisted for 9 minutes that he get back in there, because I know that deep down he wants to fight. Now, when we are emotional and we're under pressure, we say things we don't mean. We do it all the time. I do it. You've done it. In the heat of the moment, you say something. Next day, you're like, what did I do? I can't believe I just said that. Max was frustrated. He was having a little emotional moment there. And it came across as like a form, almost like self-sabotage. Like, I don't belong in here. I don't deserve this. He was so upset at himself because he is so hard on himself. And that's why he's going to be great, because he's so hard on himself, that it came out in the words where, I don't want to be here anymore. And I know that deep down, he dreams about that UFC title every day of his life. I know this because I've been on the mats with him hundreds of times, and I know that that's what he wants. But in an emotional moment a moment of weakness there, right? He said it on national television, I don't want to be here. But I know that's not the case. He wants to be there. That's what he talks about all day. It was just a really, it was a moment of weakness in which we were exposed on national television. I think people, they got the wrong message, unfortunately.
Is he the kind of fighter who needs that extra push? In other words, is he, I've heard from other fighters who told me, like, sometimes there are fighters in the gym who tend to quit a lot, or to say, like, I don't want to keep going. And they almost rely on that push. They want that push. They don't really mean it, but they say it. It's part of their character. Is he that kind of guy, or is this very foreign for him to say something like that?
It had never, I mean, he's been upset in practice, but like, I think fighters have a competitive nature. And that's a very difficult thing for, outsiders to understand, is that it's almost like we have a different code of morality on the mats. Like, they're not overlapping worlds, in the sense where what is correct out there in the world is not necessarily the same procedures that we have. And on the mats, it's all about performance. It's about outdoing yourself. It's about, being competitive with your teammates. I love my teammates, but when we train, we're trying to kill each other. And a lot of people don't understand, like, how to separate these things. Max has shown himself to be, very competitive on the mats, which I take as a good quality if we are able to channel that. As a coach, one thing you learn as a coach is you're not just talking about the physical aspect and the technical aspect, right? You become sort of a sports psychologist, and you learn your fighters, and you learn how to, deal with everyone differently. And Max has shown himself to be emotional on the mats out of being competitive, right? But I think that because he lost that second round and he knew that he had lost it, he's not used to losing. And I think that right there kind of blew up on his face a little bit, whereas he's used to winning, right? So, but it's a different skill to learn how to lose. And that's something we need to work on.
Yeah. Prior to that point, 5 fights, 5 victories. None of them went past the second round, all via finish. So just to back up what you were saying, were you okay when he accepted this fight? Like, when he took the fight on 5 days notice, were you in favor of it, or did you have some concerns, considering it's his UFC debut and there's a lot of pressure that comes with that?
Honestly, the conditioning aspect did worry me a little bit. It was more because, remember, quarantine, and he was coming from an injury, nothing major, but something was bothering him a little bit, and it did cross my mind. But this is where I always say this as a coach: when we win together. If one of my fighters tomorrow wins a title, he didn't do it alone. That's the whole team, right? Fighting is a team sport. When we lose together. So it's a matter of like not looking out the window, looking at yourself in the mirror and going, what did I do wrong? And perhaps much like Max and the rest of the camp, perhaps I was a little overconfident about him being able to win this fight even on short notice. Once again, it's based off of his previous performances and based off of his daily performances in the gym. And that's where that overconfidence came about. That's all I can say. I don't know what else to say, man. Like he's a winner. It is just that he had a weak moment there, and it was very unfortunate because we had been planning this day for a long time. But I think this is going to be a good story for the future. People love comebacks, and we're not quitting. We're not done. I hope the UFC gives us another shot. And Max has a lot to show. He has a lot of potential. All you got to do is ask anyone who's ever trained with him. It's just that it was the opposite of what we were expecting.
We'll get to the UFC angle in a second, but you mentioned obviously that you've talked to him since. We haven't heard from him. I asked to speak to him, but Brian Butler, his manager, said that he's not ready right now, and I totally respect that. I'm just curious if you could tell us, how is he doing, and does he regret what he said to you in between the second and third?
I had a chat with him. Yes, he actually called me to see how I was doing. I've been getting a lot of heat over this, and I only partially blame the fans, but I come across the bad guy, but like I really, I had the best intentions at heart at the end of the day. So Max was a little concerned about me and how I was doing. He called me and like, hey coach, how you doing? And I asked him like, hey man, are you okay with how I'm dealing with all this? Because at the same time I got his back. I don't feel like I did the wrong thing by listening to him right away. I think I did the right thing. And his position was, you're right. He didn't articulate on it. Perhaps it's very soon for him to fully be able to grasp that. But I think this is one of those things where a year from now, he's going to look back and he's going to go, yeah, thank you, coach. You did the right thing. Like, I think the more time passes by, it's very instructive to his mother messaged me, and she agreed with me as well. I think that, between myself, his mother, and his closest friends and coaches were all saying the same thing. And as well as like the support from the fight community, as far as professional fighters and coaches go, has been overwhelming. Like my phone has been blowing up with both hate and a lot of positive messages too from people that feel that I did the right thing as a coach. So it's just a rough day.
Is there a case to be made that, I can understand if a fighter says, I don't know if I have what it takes, or I want out once or twice, but if he says it repeatedly that many times with that kind of conviction, that maybe, maybe we don't like it, maybe we don't want to see it happen, but for his own good, he shouldn't go out there? Or did you feel like he just really needed that motivation?
I think that, if once again, if he were at risk, if he were hurt, I would have 100% thrown in the towel before he even said anything, if I felt that. But I know Max well enough to know that he was just having a little emotional moment. It was more psychological than anything, and he needed a push. He could have said it 100 times. I heard him the first time. But if he had managed to say it 100 times within those 60 seconds, I would have not changed my position because, once again, he was verbalizing something that he was very emotional about. I don't think that deep down, I don't think he meant it. And I think by now he already regrets it. And it's difficult for people. A lot of times fans are like overly critical about these things, but there's a connection between a coach and a fighter. There's a code of honor that we have on the mats between myself and my training partners. What I had with my coaches and I have with my students now. And it's difficult for people to understand because there's a language there that we speak that not everyone gets. Like, I know what he's thinking. I know what's going on in his head. What people see is him saying, I don't want to be in here. That's all they're seeing. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing the years of training and how many times we've had this conversation that he wants this. And people miss out on all that. They miss out on all those moments, right? So I always say this, there's a language that we speak on the mats, and not everyone speaks fighter. It's a very, it's a difficult thing for people to grasp because it's like kind of explaining to someone that, like there's never had a child, what it's like holding your child in your arms for the first time. You can't explain the feeling. Fighters know there's a reason why fighters are citing me. They know what's going on. They know my best coaches were the ones that pushed me that extra rep when I was defeated and I'm on the verge of crying and I'm quitting. I don't want to do it anymore. And they go, one more time, Robert, you can do this. And I was on the verge of tears when I was doing this. And that was so hard for me. But now I look back and I go, thank you. You pushed me to excellence. And that's what I'm looking for my fighters. I have zero interest in being mediocre. I don't do this to be mediocre. I do this to be excellent. It's always how I've been as a fighter and now as a coach. And if I can't deal with people that don't want excellence, and that's fine, it's your choice. But I'm not interested in training people like that. And I expect that from my fighters. And I expected that from Max on Saturday. It didn't go our way. Back to the drawing board. We pick ourselves up. We do it again. But I had zero interest in training people who want to be mediocre.
Um, Bob Bennett, the executive director of the Nevada State Athletic Commission, told me in regards to this exchange, quote, "That's something we will take a look at. We might want to take disciplinary action on them. That doesn't sound like they are looking out for a fighter. Obviously, he didn't want to come out and fight," end quote. How do you feel about what they're saying there, that they might take a look at the way this exchange went down? They being Nevada, of course, the Nevada State Athletic Commission.
I mean, I find myself rarely do I agree with commissions, and I mean this respectfully, but there's a reason why like so many fighters and coaches like don't agree with them all the time, because they can't understand these things that I'm talking about. They don't understand these bonds. Like they're sometimes they're normally attorneys. Like you might as well put a plumber up there. They don't know what they're talking about, and I don't know how else to say this. Like Max was having an emotional moment there. He was not injured. This is not about. If this were about safety, right? I would have been the first one to want to stop that fight. If this were about health, and I think that there's been a buildup, a momentum of like coaches making bad calls in the corner, and like people are trying to like attach this to that, but it doesn't apply in this case. This was not a matter of safety. And if it were, I think the commission would be correct in disciplining. But it's not. This is a matter of me motivating. I had a friend of mine who sent me a video of Teddy Atlas cornering Michael Moore years ago in boxing, and he's yelling at him. And the reason why, and then Michael Moore goes and wins the title, the world title, right? And then he's like, no, Teddy Atlas is a genius. And I was thinking to myself today, it's like, had I given that speech, that pep talk to Max between rounds, and Max gotten up and like pounded his chest, went out there and knocked his opponent out, I would have been a genius. I would have been a great coach. But there's a thin line in fighting between being a scumbag and being a great coach. I remember that when Anthony Pettis threw that spinning kick off the fence. You guys remember that on Ben Henderson?
Yeah.
I remember thinking, like, imagine if he slips, right, misses, and knocks himself out on the way down. And he's an idiot. But because he landed it, he's a genius. And that's how this game is, man. If you hit the mark, you're great. If you miss, you're a scumbag. Max didn't come back. It wasn't the great comeback that I wanted it to be. So I come across as a scumbag, right? But if Max had won that fight after, I would have been the greatest coach on earth. And I think that's what people. It's the nature of the business. I understand that, but I don't think I did anything wrong. Like, I did the coach's job. I think I'm proud of that moment. In fact, I think that I did the right thing, and I'd expect my coach to do the exact same thing for me as they have in the past. Pick me back up, get your butt back in there. You can still fight. You're tired. You're frustrated. You're not hurt. There's a difference.
How would you feel if Nevada did something like? Are you worried about that?
Uh, I'm
Have they
worried.
talked to you?
No, they haven't reached out to me.
Okay.
I'm worried in the sense that this would harm me, my ability to corner my fighters in the future. For myself, like I mean, it is what it is. Like they're in a position of power, and they can do whatever they feel fit to do. I don't think I did anything wrong. I think I did a good job as a coach, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. But if I were watching any other coach do this, I don't see myself condemning them. Like, good, you did exactly what a coach is supposed to do in between rounds, which is motivate your fighter. There's been a lot of work that went into Max, a lot of time, and I know that he wants this. And I think that he was just he was just being emotional, and that's what it comes down to.
I understand what you're saying about not being physically hurt, and that maybe he was just tired, he was exhausted, whatever. But isn't that equally dangerous as a fighter? If you go into that third round and you can't lift your arms, or you're just out of it, or you're defeated mentally, you could get knocked out, right? So, could you explain the difference in your mind between someone who might be, actually beat up, bloodied, right? Like maybe Anthony Smith back in May, right? That fight that everyone was talking about afterwards, and a guy who just seems like he's got nothing left and doesn't want to be there. Isn't that dangerous to a degree as well?
I think that if I were to set a hierarchy of danger compared to what we have seen in the UFC, like we make a living from a sport where people get shinned in the face repeatedly and they keep fighting. There's brain damage, right? And when we set a hierarchy, and we put that hierarchy in perspective, a hierarchy of safety, what happened on Saturday with Max was the very bottom of that hierarchy. It was not a top 5 moment of danger in the UFC. Compared to what we were used to seeing every UFC, that sits at the very, very bottom of that hierarchy, right? Let's be frank. Like, how many times have we seen people that were bloody and they had and they had been almost knocked out a few times, and they go back in there and they allow it, right? Like, these are serious situations. So if we were to make an argument for safety, I mean, let's look at the whole picture here, and let's look at all those moments that people could, the judge should have stopped the fight, perhaps, or that the fighter like broke his hand and kept fighting, right? Or they've had brain damage, they broke a jaw and they said they kept fighting. Max, there's none of that. He was just tired, and so his opponent was tired too. At the end of the second round, they're not throwing super hard anymore. You know, it's not one of those things where it's early in the round and there's like so much steam behind everything they throw. Towards the end of the second round, there you can see they slow down a lot, both of them, and that which is natural. I don't feel that if I felt that Max were in danger walking back out, and like, I wouldn't have let him fight. Like I deeply care about him as a like a little brother. That's how I feel about Max. And I don't feel that he was in danger. I feel that he was just really being emotional about that, you know, a very difficult moment, and he's not used to losing. I think that's what it comes down to.
It sounds like his UFC career might be in question now. Have they told you if they're going to bring him back for another fight?
Honestly, man, I don't know. I understand where Dana and Sean Shelby are coming from. I understand perfectly well, you know, their stance. Um, all I can say is that I think there's a chance he gets cut, but I hope he doesn't, because if there's someone that's made for the UFC, it's Max. Like he really isn't made for it. I feel that he, you know, he has this issue that we need to fix. But you know, there's a reason why he's been hyped up so much, is that people that know him know of his potential. He's a very creative fighter. He's very athletic. He's very disciplined. I don't have to ask him to show up to the gym to train. Like he's religiously there twice a day. You know, he doesn't miss a session. He's very good at following instructions for the most part. He's an easy guy to coach. You know, like when I first met him, I'm like, man, it's easy to make this guy a champion. He has all the ingredients. You know, and I've been around champions my whole life. I know what I'm talking about. But we need to fix that. And I hope that the UFC, you know, obviously I see what they don't see what I see. They see only Max quitting after the second round. But I think they'll be missing out on a huge prospect. I think that Max belongs in the top 10 of the division. I think he'd surprise a lot of people if he were given a chance to be the best version of himself. It's just that unfortunately, the best version of himself didn't come out on Saturday. You know, we had a different Max that we weren't expecting. You know, I think that the pressure played a role there, the conditioning, certainly, all of these things. But I really hope they give him another chance. I think that, you know, in 5 years from now, you know, if Max stays in the UFC, Dana's are going to go, I'm glad we kept him in, because this is the kind of guy we're looking for.
And to be clear, the issue that you feel like he has to fix is what? His cardio?
No, I mean, this was 5 days notice. Like actually, if you think about it, with a 5 day notice thing, he actually cardio. He made weight easy, and his cardio was actually, he fought 2 rounds. You know, I don't think I could have fought in 2 rounds completely out of shape. Not completely out of shape. We were moving around, but there's a difference between a camp and train shape, right? Camp
Right.
shape and train shape. And I think that you know, I think things would have been very different if we had more time. I think, but the issues we got to fix is Max got to get used to losing, and that's part of, like, he lost a round. You got to compose yourself, and you put your hands back up, and you come back. You're tired. I know it's hard, but I think because things had gone so awry throughout the fight, so at odds with how he had envisioned his UFC debut, that there's an element of self boycott there almost. Like he felt very emotional about it. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. It was almost like he was angry at himself for not performing to his the level of his expectation. I think that's really what happened. So I think that psychological issue being fixed, and I know that deep down he wants this. I know this because why else would you like be running sprints on a treadmill and running, you know, up the mountain and doing strength and condition, getting beat up every day unless you wanted this? Like, he has proven himself to be successful in both wrestling and jiu-jitsu. You know, he is a winner. It was just a very bad debut.
Well, one thing that I've said repeatedly, including recently, is that I feel like there's this culture in MMA where it's frowned upon for a coach to end the fight in between rounds or even in the middle of the fight to quote unquote throw in the towel. And in boxing, for some reason, it's a lot more accepted. And it's also frowned upon for a fighter to say what Max said. Like, I don't feel like he should be labeled as a quitter. I certainly don't think that he should be cut from the UFC. I've said that repeatedly. I think it would be a wrong move and a wrong message to send if you cut someone who took a fight on 5 days' notice and helped out the promotion. I know that they're giving him an opportunity, but now you're setting a dangerous precedent because no one will feel comfortable speaking up. Because I think he had a lot of courage to say what he said because of backlash. But I want to know if you agree with the sentiment that there is a negative stigma attached to the notion of a coach throwing in the towel or stopping a fight, and if so, why?
It's difficult because it's a very sensitive moment, and because there's so much on the line. We're talking about a lifetime of work. Like, we're talking some of these guys start wrestling when they're 6, 7 years old. And it goes on and on and on. And then 20 years later, they're in the UFC. And it's like everything you do in your life is leading up to one moment. And there's so much emotion. There's so much going on, right? And the better the relationship between the fighter and the coach, the more apt the coach is to make that call, right? Like I've cornered people I barely know. I don't like to do that because of these moments. I don't know them that well, right? I feel that the coach is in a better position to make that call if he has a good relationship with the fighter and he knows him well. But it's a difficult thing. Like because you don't know how bad someone is hurt, and when they're just being like, I don't want to be here anymore, and then they're going to regret it the next day. I've had moments. I'll give you an example, not exactly related, but I wish some of my coaches had been harder on me. I wish that my parents had been harder on me and like forced me to like study more and be more productive about my time. Like I wish, like going back, people had been harder on me. Right. So, I mean, I would hate to be in a situation where I'm having a bad moment and my coach doesn't lift me up. And then I regret it for the rest of my life. And I'm almost like, coach, you should have pushed me. And the coach understands this dynamic. So the coach is going, oh, I don't want to be that guy either. So what is it? Are you really that injured, or are you just like having a bad moment and you need a little push? And it's hard to say because we don't have an MRI. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm not a doctor. And even doctors can't always tell what's going on the inside. Right. So it's a very delicate situation. I think that, people don't always mean what they say, and it's hard to explain to people. I don't want to come across the wrong way, but like I've said things to people that I deeply regret the next day. And I go, man, I can't believe I said that. I'm such an idiot. These things happen. We're human. We're flawed. We're not perfect. And, I can't give you a straight answer. It's a very complicated issue because you don't want to be on the wrong side of history. But during that split second and all the emotion, everything that's on the line, it is incredibly difficult to make the right call. It's not an easy thing. Everyone wants to do the right thing, but it's not an easy thing to do under those circumstances.
Have you ever said what Max has said in your competitive career? Have you ever asked out and someone told you, no, we're going to keep going? Has that ever happened to you?
In practice, never in a fight. And in practice, it's happened a few times, and the coach made me do an extra rep, and for that, I'm thankful. In a fight, I guess my got too big of an ego too. But I don't know, man. It's everyone's different now. That's
Yeah.
one thing we know about fighting is we're not clones. We're designed differently, not only anatomically but also psychologically. Our psychologies are completely different. So, with this in mind, I don't think it's hard to tap. Like, how do you get way in there and know what's truly going inside a fighter's heart? Like, how do you? And people always said it. There's so much more to just him saying it, man. There's a life of work here that also speaks. It's
Right.
not the only thing going on, man. There's a desire there that doesn't always come across in language, and the fans don't see. But man, this kid has been on the mats his whole life. Like, what does that say? Does that mean something?
You know, there are a lot of new fans to the sport now, and a lot of them may not know your credentials, may not know who you are, and that bums me out because, like I said, you are a legend from the world of BJJ, and you had a great fighting career as well. And so I hope that people learn about you, that you're not some Joe Schmo off the street who has no idea what you're talking about. And I feel bad that you have had to go through the last couple of days. I don't necessarily feel any different than what I said, but I think it's healthy that we can have a conversation like this and speak in a professional manner. I'm just curious, what has the last couple of days been like for you? And I know you're starting this team in Las Vegas, and you've got a lot of great young fighters like Max over there. And I don't think anyone should think twice about working with you. Things happen, controversial moments happen, things that I disagree with. You could say, who the hell am I? And I respect that. But how has it been like for you to be at the center of this?
Man, I'll be honest with you. Like, I stopped coaching MMA maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago. Like, it's like kind of like when Forrest retired. That was one of the last like big fights that I cornered. And there's only, like, I'll mention their names. There are people that have been very fair with me in this business, particularly Forrest Griffin and Frank Mir. I always like to say that. And there are people that are very unfair with me. They take your time for granted, and they think that putting you on TV is payment. They think, oh, you're going to get 10 seconds of television and that's your payment. Like, hey, man, I got a mortgage, I got kids, I got a family. And being undervalued as a coach kind of breaks you, and it's like one of those things. Well, if you don't listen to me, if you don't trust me, and you don't believe my time is worth anything, then maybe I shouldn't be training you. And it kind of broke me. Like, it was years and years of not being appreciated, broke me completely. I didn't want to do this. I went back to the BJJ world, which I like less and less, to be honest with you. It's gone in a very strange direction that I don't appreciate. But and when Max knocked on my door one day, he goes, "Hey, man, I want to be trained by you." He came from one of my black belts in North Carolina, Sean Spangler, recommended he come to Vegas and train with me, and I didn't want to do it at first, but Max kind of like he kept showing up every day. So I'm like, let's do this, right? So I have a vision of getting what I like from BJJ, which is the camaraderie and that there's a brotherhood that's created on the mats, right? That I wanted to create that in MMA, and I saw Khabib's camp doing it, right? Khabib, he has something very special. I think there's a reason why he's so successful, and it's not just his skills. Watch him and his friends. Watch him and his training partners. Pay close attention. That's a brotherhood right there. And that right there is a huge element of the equation that people completely neglect. Everyone thinks about the fighter and the toughness and the technique and the condition. What about the emotional aspect? What about the emotional support about people around it? That's a very important thing. So I felt that these things existed in BJJ and they're very rare in MMA. So I wanted to bring some of that culture in and do something different. And we got excited, man. Like I think I have all the right ideas for MMA. I think that MMA in a lot of ways hasn't evolved a lot in the past 10 years. And I think it has to do with the culture. It's a culture of just punch them in the face and stand back up. And that's kind of like everyone's solution. Like I see coaches like that's their solution to every problem. They'll punch you in the face and just stand back up. If they were that easy, anyone could do it. And I wanted to how can we push the threshold and create something that is pushing the envelope in terms of technique. And Max was a perfect for a guy for this because he is a creative guy. He's very athletic. He had a very successful career in wrestling. He has done incredibly well in jiu-jitsu considering how long he's been training, like most D1 wrestlers do. And I felt like, man, we can do a lot with this kid. So there's a lot of time and energy that got put into Max, and I don't regret it for a second. I still believe in him. It's just that things didn't go our way. But that doesn't change our plans at all. Like I just had a chat with the team this morning, and I have a young group of fighters who I believe in a lot. I think they have a lot of potential. And it might take a minute. Like everyone wants to get a champion made. He's all the way to the top and he's already a top contender. And that doesn't take a lot of skill. This. It takes close to no skill, right? It's much difficult to build someone, but I enjoy the challenge. I don't have a problem working with amateur fighters and building them up and teaching them and sharing some of my experience of, some of my, training and fighting myself. And I think that we have the right idea for a successful team, but it's just not going our way right now.
Robert, I appreciate this very much. Thank you so much for talking to me. I know that you will be back. I hope that Max will be back as well, not just in the UFC, but fighting. But I certainly hope that he gets another shot in the UFC. I think he has earned that opportunity and deserves that opportunity based on the fact that he took a fight on short notice. And I hope that this doesn't define him. And I don't think it will define him. But I appreciate you clearing up the air and giving us your side of the story. And I think that you are entitled to do that. And I hope that you feel good about what we accomplish here today. So thank you very much. And I wish you and the rest of the team the best.
Thank you, Ari. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN Plus.